history remembers the great wars of the 20th century: World War I, World War II, and Vietnam. But buried beneath the weight of these colossal conflicts lies a war most people never speak of. It was a war that determined the fate of millions, a war that birthed a nation, and yet it is absent from most history classrooms. This was the Philippine-American War, a bloody conflict that shaped the modern Philippines. It began with hope and betrayal, a revolution against Spanish rule that turned into a struggle against a new empire. What made this war so unique was not just the fighting, but the way it was hidden from the world, reduced to a footnote in global memory. America emerged as a power, while Filipinos paid with blood for their independence. Why do so many ignore this war? Was it overshadowed by bigger events, or deliberately erased to protect reputations? Today, we bring the forgotten past to light. The Philippine-American War was not just a colonial conflict, it was the crucible in which the Philippines as we know it today was born. For over 3 centuries, the Philippines lived under Spanish rule, where Catholicism spread, galleons sailed, and revolts were crushed. By the late 1800s, however, the winds of nationalism began to stir. Leaders like José Rizal and Andrés Bonifacio inspired Filipinos to dream of a nation free from colonial chains. The Katipunan, a secret revolutionary society, ignited rebellion. The revolution was not merely about politics, it was about identity. Generations of Filipinos had lived under foreign control, but they now envisioned themselves as one people, bound by shared language, culture, and struggle. The idea of freedom was no longer distant. It was a living flame. But Spain was determined to hold on, and as uprisings spread, brutal crackdowns followed. Thousands were imprisoned, executed, or driven into hiding. Yet, the dream persisted. By the late 1890s, the revolution was gaining ground, and the colonial world trembled at the possibility of losing one of its oldest colonies in Asia. As revolution raged in the Philippines, another power set its eyes on the Pacific. The United States, driven by expansionist ambitions and fueled by the ideology of manifest destiny, saw opportunity in the Spanish colonies. Cuba, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines were pawns in a game of empire. In 1898, the Spanish-American War broke out. America, declaring itself the champion of freedom against Spanish tyranny, quickly defeated Spanish forces. In Manila Bay, Admiral George Dewey's fleet crushed the Spanish Navy, leaving the Philippines exposed. Filipino revolutionaries believed liberation was near. But freedom came with a price. The Treaty of Paris, signed in December 1898, transferred the Philippines from Spain to the United States for $20 million. Filipinos had not been consulted, their independence ignored. Betrayal hung heavy in the air. The colonizer had simply changed its face. At first, Filipino revolutionaries had welcomed American assistance. They saw the United States as a partner against Spain, a nation that had itself won independence through revolution. Leaders like Emilio Aguinaldo believed a true alliance had been formed. But America had other plans. When Filipinos declared independence in June 1898, they raised their flag and proclaimed a republic. Yet, the U.S. refused to recognize it. Instead, they prepared for occupation, treating Filipinos not as equals, but as subjects to be governed. The promises of liberty dissolved into imperial ambition. The betrayal stung deeply. What had begun as cooperation turned to mistrust. The Philippines was not a prize to be bought and sold, but America saw it as a stepping stone to Asia gateway to trade, power, and influence. And so, the seeds of war were sown. The night of February 4, 1899, changed everything. At the outskirts of Manila, an American sentry fired upon Filipino soldiers who had approached his post. That single shot sparked a battle that spread rapidly, igniting a war neither side could turn away from. What followed was chaos. Filipino forces, still poorly armed compared to the Americans, fought with determination, trying to defend the republic they had declared. Skirmishes turned into full battles as the U.S. Army advanced, determined to crush resistance. The war had officially begun. America called it an insurrection, as if Filipinos were rebelling against rightful authority. But for Filipinos, it was a war for survival, a desperate fight to prove their sovereignty against an empire determined to deny them. The Philippine-American War was unlike the romanticized revolutions of the past. It was dirty, bloody, and merciless. The Americans, armed with superior firepower and logistics, waged a campaign of overwhelming force. Filipinos, outmatched, turned to guerrilla warfare, using forests and villages as cover. The war blurred the line between soldier and civilian. Villages suspected of aiding rebels were burned. Civilians were herded into zones to separate them from fighters. Disease and hunger spread rapidly, claiming countless lives. The cruelty of war scarred the land and the people. For America, it was a test of empire. For the Philippines, it was a nightmare of survival. Both sides committed atrocities, but the imbalance of power ensured the cost for Filipinos was far higher. Independence, once so close, seemed to slip further away with each passing month. Emilio Aguinaldo, the leader of the Philippine Republic, tried to rally his forces. His dream was to establish a government recognized by the world, to show that Filipinos were capable of self-rule. But as defeats mounted, unity wavered and divisions deepened. Aguinaldo's government was forced into hiding, moving from town to town as American troops closed in. Leaders were captured or killed, while some chose collaboration in hopes of survival. The republic that had begun with such promise was crumbling under relentless pressure. Yet, Aguinaldo refused to give in. Even in exile, he continued to inspire resistance, believing that the spirit of freedom could not be extinguished by defeat. His struggle symbolized the determination of a people unwilling to surrender, even in the face of overwhelming odds. With open battles lost, Filipino fighters adapted. They melted into the countryside, striking with speed and disappearing before American reinforcements could respond. This guerrilla warfare turned the war into a grinding, endless conflict. The Americans, unfamiliar with the terrain, faced ambushes, traps, and sudden raids. Supply lines were cut, patrols harassed, and outposts attacked. The war dragged on, costing lives and money far more than the U.S. had anticipated. But guerrilla warfare came at a cost for civilians. The lines between combatant and non-combatant blurred, and entire communities were punished for suspected support of fighters. The countryside became a battlefield where ordinary people paid the heaviest price. As the war intensified, the brutality grew. Reports of massacres, torture, and scorched earth tactics emerged. Entire villages were destroyed, and civilians were imprisoned in concentration zones. The war revealed the dark side of America's imperial ambitions. Back in the United States, debates raged. Some politicians and journalists condemned the war, calling it a betrayal of American ideals. Others justified it as a necessary step to civilize and uplift the Filipinos. The truth was often hidden, censored to maintain the image of America as a liberator. And so, the war was silenced. While atrocities in Europe or other parts of the world were remembered, the Philippine-American War was pushed aside, too inconvenient for the narrative of American democracy and freedom. In 1901, the war reached a turning point. Emilio Aguinaldo, betrayed by a captured ally, was taken prisoner by American forces. His capture symbolized the collapse of organized resistance. The dream of a united republic seemed shattered. Aguinaldo, weary and broken, took an oath of allegiance to the United States, urging others to lay down their arms. For many, this was a bitter blow, a sign that even their leader had given up. Yet, resistance did not end completely. Small groups continued to fight, refusing to surrender. But without leadership, coordination, or resources, the rebellion weakened. By 1902, America declared the war officially over. Though violence and resistance lingered for years to come, With the war declared over, America set about transforming the Philippines into its colony. Schools were built, English introduced, and infrastructure developed. The U.S. presented itself as a modernizer, a force for progress. Yet beneath the surface, resentment smoldered. The improvements came at the cost of independence. Filipinos were treated as subjects, not partners. Their land, culture, and identity were reshaped to fit American interests. The promise of freedom remained out of reach. For America, the Philippines was a prize and outpost in Asia, a stepping stone for trade and military presence. For Filipinos, it was a reminder that their revolution had been stolen, their independence postponed by decades. Why is this war ignored today? One reason lies in deliberate erasure. America did not want to be seen as an empire, so the narrative of liberation overshadowed the story of conquest. The war was rebranded as a minor conflict, stripped of its weight. Another reason was overshadowing. The 20th century soon erupted with wars far larger: World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. The Philippine-American War, though bloody, was eclipsed by these global events. It became a shadow, lost in the noise of history. And for the Philippines, still struggling under colonial rule for decades, the story was often shaped by the victors. Only later did historians and citizens begin reclaiming the memory of what had been lost. Despite defeat, the war left a lasting legacy. It proved that Filipinos would fight for their freedom, no matter the cost. The resistance, though crushed, planted the seeds of future independence. National identity was forged in the crucible of struggle. The war also revealed the hypocrisy of empire. America, founded on liberty, had denied it to others. This contradiction would echo in future debates about U.S. foreign policy and the nature of democracy itself. For the Philippines, the war was not just about loss, it was about endurance. The memory of sacrifice fueled generations who continued the struggle until independence was finally achieved in 1946. Decades later, the Philippines again became a battleground during World War II. Japanese occupation brought new suffering, but the spirit of resistance, born in the earlier war, endured. Guerrillas once again fought in the jungles, keeping hope alive. The Philippine-American War had prepared the nation for resilience. It had taught Filipinos the cost of freedom and the need for unity. Though Japan's invasion was different in scale, the memory of past struggles gave strength to resist. And once again, the Philippines found itself entangled in the ambitions of great powers, its fate shaped by wars far beyond its borders. In recent years, historians and educators have begun to shine light on the Philippine-American War. Books, documentaries, and academic studies work to restore the memory of a war too long ignored. The voices of those who suffered are finally being heard. The war is no longer just about statistics or treaties, it is about people. Families torn apart, villages destroyed, and generations scarred. Their stories remind us that history is not only written by victors, but preserved by those who refuse to forget. Rediscovering this war is not just about the past, it is about the present. It challenges us to ask hard questions about empire, freedom, and the cost of ignoring inconvenient truths. Though born in suffering, the Philippine-American War marked the beginning of the modern nation. It showed the world that the Philippines was not just a colony, but a people determined to stand as a nation. Independence may have been delayed, but it was not denied forever. The sacrifices of 1899 to 1902 became part of the foundation of Philippine identity. Every flag raised, every anthem sung, carries the memory of those who fought and fell. The war that the world ignored was the war that gave birth to the Philippines we know today. Its silence in history books does not erase its truth. The nation's story is written in blood, resilience, and unbroken will. The Philippine-American War may be forgotten by many, but it cannot remain silent forever. It was a war of betrayal and brutality, of courage and resistance, of defeat and endurance. It shaped nations and defined identities. By remembering it, we honor those who sacrificed everything for a dream of freedom. We also confront the uncomfortable truths about empire, justice, and the price of independence. History is not just what is remembered, it is also what is forgotten, waiting to be rediscovered. So, when we ask why most people ignore the war that birthed modern Philippines, the answer is clear. Forgetting was convenient, but remembering is necessary. For only by remembering can we understand the struggles of the past and carry forward the lessons into the future.